Hi, Nancy.
Hey, Bill. Let's see, Bill, Mr. Battle, Louisa, our guest, Chuck. Where's everybody else? All right, let's give 1 minute for a few other folks to arrive. I don't have any excused absences, so everybody should be here. Welcome to our guest, Mr. Coker.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
And we'll get on with your presentation shortly. Hey, Marilyn.
Good evening.
And Mr. Kevin.
Good evening, Nancy.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's been a lot of email traffic in the last couple hours.
Right.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Hey, Kenny.
Okay. Hi.
Hey,
All right.
oh.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Marilyn, I listened to Andrea's presentation to the council on the trash thing, and the guy that spoke first, Floyd Hoyt or Holt,
Mr. Holt,
he said something about that we had prior to 1990, we were paying, independent haulers for our trash pickup. I moved here in 79. I've never paid an independent trash hauler to pick up trash, starting in 79. So I don't know where he was talking about or what he was basing it on, because I went back and checked my records. I don't have any receipts from anything like that. So I've always been getting county paid trash pickup. Or
I've had county pickup since at least 1972.
did you ever pay
No, sir.
other than through your taxes? Yeah,
That's-
neither did I. So
That's correct. And I've lived at this address for 54 years and never paid other
Yeah,
than
I've only-
county taxes.
yeah, so I don't know where he came up with 1990 being the point at which people were starting to have to, the county was paying for stuff, but that was not the case for here where I live in Lanham. And it sounds for where Chuck lives too.
I don't know. I think 1990 was about the time frame we likely added yard trim collections. But since I've been working for the county, we've had county curbside collections, except for in the southern area of the county.
Now, recycling was added. I used to have to go over to College Park at the university and dump my recycling prior to the county starting to pick up. But that ended, and that may have been 1990, but I don't think it was that late that had started either.
Yeah.
Actually, Bill, I did that with Laurel.
So I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember when it started, but prior to that, that's what I was doing with my recyclables. I'd separate them out and take them out. In fact, they were not doing single stream, so yeah, I had to separate the glass and the
Yeah.
plastics and newspapers and stuff like that, which was was no problem. But
Yeah, we ran that little operation in College Park.
Really?
Marilyn? Yes.
That's where I used to take my stuff too. Separate
Yeah.
my paper into color paper, white paper, glossy paper.
Yeah, this was around 1990. It was a long time ago. Yep, about 1990.
Yeah.
Marilyn, you have your hand up. Oh, no, you don't. Okay. Okay, so it looks like Barbara joined us. I know Dave is going to be with us. I don't see him on here.
Sorry, I had tremendous trouble getting in.
no, I see Dave.
Just forever. And my picture somehow doesn't turn on. It's according to the boxes on the bottom left, it says a video's on, but you're not seeing a picture, so sorry. I don't know why.
Bill, you said you see Dave. I don't see him.
Yeah, I see him.
Dave, are you here?
He's muted.
His picture and he's muted.
He's below Kenneth in my presentation that I see.
No,
There he is. Okay.
unmuted.
Okay. We're still missing Jonathan Mr. Kova and Nyla. So, but let's get going because we've got a busy schedule and we have a guest. So, so call the meeting to order at about 6:05. As I mentioned, there's a few folks missing. Let's hope that they just show up late. And I want to make a point tonight to welcome Louisa Robles. So welcome, Louisa.
you.
I know it's been a long journey,
Yes.
a long journey. But we are thrilled to have you. And I think it was today. I didn't realize it was today you were being sworn in by the council. So,
Yes.
I don't know whether to say I'm just glad you got through it or congratulations, but maybe they're both in order.
Yeah, on
So,
your perseverance.
yeah. So,
Congratulations to Chuck also.
so for folks who don't know,
Nancy,
Louisa, yeah.
you hear me? Congratulations to Chuck also. Let's not.
No, I was going to get to him.
Oh, okay,
No.
sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, I didn't forget. And actually, see, it's right here on my paper. Don't forget Chuck. But Luis is new. Not to say Chuck is older. Member, an older member. Chuck's been on the commission a long time, but
Longer term.
Louise is brand new, and it's very exciting. She is has educational background, a very serious educational background in these things, environmental sustainability issues, and she works for the city of Greenbelt. So she's actually in their public works department and focuses, I think, on recycling and sustainability. And very interested in composting. So it's great to have, actually, it's really fabulous to have somebody who actually works in a department also on the team, because as we know from working with the staff of the county, it's really important to have their input on things. So having that city perspective, I think, will be very helpful. So Louisa, just want to say thank you for hanging in there.
Thank you.
And we're really pleased. And Chuck, here you go. Round whatever number it is now. So
3.
round 3. So welcome back, and
Thank you.
let's get you plugged in a little bit more on some things. That would be really great. So I'm really excited to have a renewing member and a new member, and we're now up to 9. I'll just very briefly, and we're going to go right into our presentation. I got COVID recently, and I hadn't had it, and I've been a bit out of commission for several weeks. So you'll have to forgive was not able to keep up with certain things, but I did yesterday get the letter that we had agreed by unanimous consent to send to the council requesting a change in our composition. And you all should, I sent that out yesterday, and you all should have copies of that in your email box. So I did hear back from Eric Olson's, Councilmember Olson's assistant, I guess he's maybe the lead person or the legislative person, acknowledging they had received it and they would be in touch with us. So that was all very good.
Marilyn,
just-
can I ask a question about that briefly? I don't want to
yeah.
tie the meeting because I know there's other business. It's suggested to go back up to 15. And for those of us that have been around, recall that when it was 15, it was frequently difficult to get a quorum. Have you considered that when you made?
Yes, Chuck. So the way that it's that I presented it to be put it into the legislation, which we did mention this last month, was that it's a range.
Up
so
to.
It's up to, which means if it's 9, then it's just a quorum for 9. If it's whatever the number is, if it's 11, it's a quorum for 11. If it's 15, it's a different quorum. So so that is not going to be a problem anymore.
Hopefully. Okay.
Well, it shouldn't be. And if it is, we'll
I
fix
just
it.
wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the issues we had in the past when it was 15.
Well, the issue in the past was that we had a quorum we could never meet. Now the quorum should be commensurate with the size that we are at any given point.
Got it.
So that was a difference. And that's what should have happened the first time the change was made. And I have spoken to council about this additionally over the summer, who was supportive, but wanted us to formally make that request, and we've done so. So with that, we're going to move into our presentation. And Dave, if you wouldn't mind doing the honors to introduce Mr. Coker in the presentation, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I'll be glad to. Um, I guess I should start out by saying that one of the things I've learned in talking to Steve Birchfield at our compost facility is that the numbers we're getting there are not what I was thinking. That I thought they'd be greater. And I checked around a little bit. And one of the things that I was told is that people who might be ordinarily bringing it to us are taking it up to the Jessup AD facility. And I talked to someone there. I got some information about Mr. Coker, who has actually done a fairly substantial report that about the Montgomery County study looking for alternatives to incineration, which could be composting or anaerobic digestion. And then I've since had a couple nice conversations with Mr. Coker and his willingness to talk tonight. And I think it would be really good for us to learn a little bit more about anaerobic digestion because it's an alternative to composting, but it's something I think we should be also looking at because we're trying to do everything we can do to keep that the organics out of the landfill. And I think that's the ultimate goal. So without further ado, I'm really happy to have Mr. Coker here tonight to talk about anaerobic digestion. And I'm hoping to learn a lot more than I know about it. So thank you. Thank you, Craig, for coming tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you, David, for the introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pleasure to meet everybody electronically. I guess, Kevin, are you going to move the slides for me? Yep. Allow me to introduce myself. I am a self-employed environmental engineer. I've been in the organics recycling space since 1977, when my very first project, not my very first, but one of my first projects as an undergraduate was the work on the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission sewage sludge composting facility in Calverton, Maryland. I have an undergrad degree in environmental science and a master's degree in sanitary engineering. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. I lived there from 1954 to 1996. Worked for Montgomery County in the early 1980s, developing what was then the Dickerson Interim Biosolids Composting Facility. It is now their yard trim facility. And I am working with them to find a site for a second facility to compost food waste. Next slide. The real problem that we face in the world of organics today is that the organics going into landfills decompose anaerobically to produce methane before the landfill gas collection systems can be extended into the active landfill cell to intercept that landfill gas and siphon it off, either to flare it off or to reuse it as renewable energy. Now, recent work by EPA has found that the food waste landfilled in America's landfills is responsible for about 58% of the fugitive methane emissions coming from landfills. Next slide. So not only are we seeing the total quantity of methane emissions from landfills climbing, but we are seeing the proportion of those methane emissions contributed from landfill food waste also climbing. And as we all know, methane is a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So this is a fairly significant problem. And there's a recent report from EPA on this that I refer you to, and you can see the report.
Craig, can you hold on one second? Can everybody mute? Can you, because there's like back noise. So can everybody mute their sound because it's reverberating?
I'm wondering too if Craig, if you could talk up just a little bit louder. You're kind of quiet.
Okay.
Okay, so if everybody else, Dave, if you can go ahead and mute. Okay.
All right. So as I mentioned, landfill methane emissions from landfill food waste are on the rise. It's far more problematic greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And so that's the big driver behind finding solutions for diverting organics. Next slide. I believe we should look at these problems systematically or holistically, that we need to look at diversionary strategies that remove food waste from the waste stream to begin with. An example being waste reduction, backyard composting, those kinds of things. That we look at the most effective ways of collecting them. Do we collect food waste along with the yard waste? Do we collect food waste separately from the yard waste? How do we process the food waste? Do we use composting? Do we use AD? Do we use a combination? Do we turn it into animal feed? There are several alternatives. And then equally important, what do we do with the products that we're going to make from the recovered organics? You know, California has a law that says if you're a municipality in California, you must purchase recovered organic products at the rate equal to 0.8 tons of compost or mulch or what have you per capita. So if you have a city with a population of 100,000 people, you have to buy 8,000 tons a year of organics. So product usage is part of it. Now, today we're just going to look at the processing side, and we're just going to look at anaerobic digestion. Next slide. So what is AD? It is the controlled reduction of organic materials in the absence of oxygen. So it's a biochemical production system similar to composting, but a different biochemistry. It has two major products, methane and carbon dioxide, and it has residuals, which are called digestate. There are also trace gases like hydrogen sulfide. Could be gases like siloxanes, and of course, water. Next slide. Don't worry, this is not going to be on the midterms. You don't have to take notes. But this is the chemistry of anaerobic digestion. It's a 4-step process that each step has to take place under optimum processing conditions. So the food waste, the carbohydrates and the proteins and what have you, are reduced by microbes to become soluble molecules that are further reduced by fermentation and then by other biochemical processes to make the methane and the carbon dioxide that are the final products of anaerobic digestion. These processes can happen in one reactor. They can be separated so that they happen in separate reactors. There's a number of configurations, and we'll get to that. Next slide. Now, the biogas, which is the primary output of an AD system, is mostly methane, anywhere from 55 to 70%. Most of the rest of it is carbon dioxide. You will get some hydrogen sulfide, some ammonia, and these gases called siloxanes. And siloxanes are due to you see them more in landfill gas than you see it in like the biogas produced by the Jessup plant, because they come from the decomposition of personal care products that contain silicon. And they can be very problematic in landfill gas. Next slide. Now, not all wastes are suitable for producing biogas. You'll see here that the gases that have the most biomethane generation potential, or BMP for short, are fats and greases, bakery waste, and food scraps. Notice that you get down into like green clippings or green waste is not a very good source of biogas. Next slide. Now, digestate, which is the residual left over from anaerobic digestion, a lot of anaerobic digestion vendors call it a black gold, or they see it as a great resource. In reality, it's a cost that has to be managed. Now, it's often called a fiber, in part because those anaerobic digestion facilities that are on agricultural farms for dairy cattle or similar herbivore animals often have fibrous material in their manure from the hay they eat. And so the fiber ends up in the digestate. And now many digestates are actually liquids, and we'll get to that in a minute. So sometimes they have to be dewatered. Next slide. So liquid digestates, this is the kind of digestate produced by the gesso plant. This is the kind of digestate you see produced by the anaerobic digesters at the Piscataway wastewater treatment plant. These are liquids, and for the most part, they're land applied to cropland, which is the cheapest way of handling them. If you have to dewater these thick, heavy liquids, then you have an extra processing step and an extra cost. But you have to dewater them if you're going to compost them or dry them and turn them into a product. The Blue Plains wastewater treatment plant dries their digestate and sells it as a product called Bloom. But most digestates, liquids, are land applied to cropland. And that's a little bit of a challenge in a densely developed urban area like the DC metropolitan area, where the amount of cropland is shrinking. It's further and further away. You have longer trucking distances. In fact, the Jessup, Maryland plant, which, as you may know, is on a very small site, trucks their digestate up into central Pennsylvania every day, several hundred miles round trip. Next slide. Now, another form of digestion is called dry fermentation, which is where it's treated as a solid waste. And I'll show you some information about that in a minute. This digestate is more of a solid waste, and so it's much more amenable to immediate composting than the more liquid forms of digestate. Next slide. So as I mentioned, the liquid digestates are usually used as a crop fertilizer supplement. If they're dewatered, we see a lot of the more fibrous forms of digestate from animal agriculture reused as animal bedding. We see it applied to crops. We see it as a feedstock to composting. There's a AD facility in Southington, Connecticut called Quantum Bioenergy, and they dewater their digestate and compost it on site with yard waste. It's been used as a peat substitute, and you can dry it for the fertilizer market. Next slide. Now, the issues with regard to digestate are focused primarily on pathogen kill. As you know, you have to reach a certain time-temperature relationship when you recycle food waste in order to kill the pathogens. And that time-temperature relationship is 55 degrees Celsius or 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 consecutive days. Most anaerobic digesters don't get to that temperature. So what comes out of the digester in terms of digestate is not pathogen-free. And therefore, either has to be land applied under the rules that guide the land application of residuals that have some pathogen content, or it has to be processed in a way that makes it pathogen-free, aka composting, heat drying, or something like that. You will get odors with digestate from volatile fatty acids that haven't fully decomposed. That was one of the reasons why the Heartland Biogas Project outside of Denver was shut down in 2018, was due to excessive odor issues. You can get both ammonia and methane emissions from digestate for a period of time if you don't immediately process that digestate by composting or by drying. So you're creating, or you're dealing with additional greenhouse gas emissions. And the disposal of the filtrate after you dewater digestate is problematic because it has a lot of nitrogen in it. And as we know, everything that drains to the Chesapeake Bay is sensitive to nutrient issues. So land application of digestates or of raw organics like sewage sludge are limited in many cases due to nutrient management plans. So the ammonia in the dewatered effluent can create disposal issues. Next slide. Now, there are several types of AD systems. We'll classify them first by temperature regime and then by configuration. There are 3 major temperature regimes, as you see here. We very rarely see a cycrophilic digester. You might see those in developing countries for household wastes. Mesophilic is the major classification for digesters. The planted jessup is a mesophilic digester. And mesophilic is a temperature range between about 90 and 104, 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Then above 104 up to about 160 is called thermophilic, and that's where we want to be for pathogen kill with food waste. We need to be in that thermophilic range. Next slide. Now, most digesters are liquids. These are the kinds you see at wastewater treatment plants like Piscataway. This is what you see at Jessup. These are basically large tanks that have the organics in there. They're mixed to keep them in suspension. They decompose anaerobically. The biogas bubbles to the top and is siphoned off to be reused as renewable energy. So they are most of them are continually stirred tank reactors. Next slide. This is an example of one that is digesting biosolids and food waste outside Ohio State University in Worcester, Ohio. You see the tank on the right is the feedstock storage tank. So the feedstocks come in, they are pumped into that tank, and then pumped from that tank into the reactor. The dome on top is the inflatable gas bubble that stores the biogas that's produced. This is similar to the kind of facility that's operating in Jessup. And that's why many of these kinds of liquid digesters look for industrial food processing residuals more than they look for the traditional food waste collected from residential or commercial sources. Because the industrial food processing waste stream is often a liquid and can be pumped directly into the reactor. It doesn't have to be pulverized or macerated or slurried the way conventional food waste has to be slurried before it can be made pumpable. Next slide. Another kind of AD system being developed here in the US is called a plug flow reactor. It's basically a horizontal tube where you feed from one end and the paddles move the material through the reactor. It decomposes anaerobically. The biogas is siphoned off for reuse. And then the digestate is often dewatered and the solids go to composting or land application. The liquids go to a wastewater treatment plant or in some cases recycled back into the process to liquefy the contents. Next slide. This is one in San Luis Obispo, California. You see the horizontal reactor in the left-hand picture, the horizontal cylinder at the lower right. And again, these are very complex electromechanical systems. Next slide. Now, a slurry digester, we don't have any of these in the US yet. These can handle a thicker liquid because they use the same kind of pumps that you see being used to pump concrete to the top floor of a high rise. They're called piston pumps, and they can pump a heavy, thick material quite a distance. And so they pump the substrate or the organics up to the top of the reactor, and it drifts downward, the biogas bubbles up. Next slide. This is one in Belgium in the city of Brecht. Does about 50,000 tons per year of kitchen and garden waste. So they macerate the kitchen and garden waste to be a thick pumpable material. They pump it into the reactor, which is at the left-hand side of the photograph. That digester is about 45 feet in diameter and 75 feet tall. And this particular reactor produces electricity, which is one of the uses of biogas, is to either make electricity or to make a renewable natural gas. Next slide. Solid waste digesters are very popular in Europe. There are 2 of them here in the US. They're also known as dry fermenters, and they look a lot like a very big self-storage unit that's roughly 20 feet by 20 feet by 80 feet deep with really, really heavy doors. And you basically fill it with a front end loader, close the door, and turn the system on. Next slide. So you see here that in a dry fermentation unit, the biomass, in this case, a combination of food waste and green waste, is loaded into the reactor with a front end loader. And then the door is closed, and the liquid is sprayed down onto this biomass. They call it, the European term is percolate, but it's basically leachate. And that floods the biomass with water so that no oxygen can be inside the biomass. That causes the biomass to decompose anaerobically. The gas is siphoned off from the roof, and the biomass decomposes anaerobically for about 30 days. Next slide. So these are some reactors I saw in Denmark a few years ago. They were loaded with a front end loader. You can see on the lower right-hand picture, the dark stain on the wall is actually caused by the biogas siphoning up into the biogas bladder up in the attic. Next picture. Next slide, rather. Oshkosh, Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin has one. That was the first installation. They do about 8,000 tons a year of food scraps and landscaping debris. Same kind of thing. They load it with a front end loader. And then they empty it with a front end loader, handling it all as a solid waste. Next slide. Maryland does have some guidance on how to permit anaerobic digestion. They don't have anaerobic digestion regulations yet. They are thinking about that, but these are the kinds of permits that you would need from MDE for any kind of anaerobic digestion system. Refuse disposal, if you're going to use sewage sludge, of course, you'll have a different permit, and then quite a few permits for the water side of things. Next slide. So AD is a processing technology for handling organics. It's not a silver bullet. It's not the be all and end all for recycling organics. It's just one way to do it. It does not compete with composting. AD merely extracts the organic carbon from food waste and turns it into a renewable energy. You're still left with the material after you've extracted that renewable energy that you have to do something with. So they are complementary technologies. They are not exclusionary. There are always going to be potential fugitive emissions of methane from anaerobic digesters. Could be a leaking valve, could be just the residual methane coming out of the digestate as it's pulled out of the reactor. There's a number of potential sources of fugitive emissions of methane in AD. Now, digestate management is very challenging in areas subject to nutrient management plans like Prince George's County. And that makes it very challenging to spread the digestate for land application to cropland. As I mentioned as I opened my presentation, I believe all processing technologies for organics need to be looked at holistically with regard to diversion, collection, and end product usage. And also note that the AD industry in the US is very heavily dominated by the private sector, and they are always looking for economies of scale. So most AD systems being proposed by the private sector are on the order of 100,000 tons per year or more. Jessup, Maryland has a capacity of 115,000 tons per year. And so speaking to David's comment at the beginning about how the amount of food waste showing up at Western Branch might not be what was originally contemplated, I suspect that the real reason, and I'm seeing this in other communities that I work in, the real reason is not that it's going to Jessup for AD. The real reason is that people are putting it out at curbside. We're finding that the amount of participation in source-separated organics diversion programs is far less than we originally planned. And I think as a professional in the industry, my theory is we grossly underestimated the ick factor. We thought people would adopt these diversion programs. They'd be happy to do so. And there are those who will. There are early adopters and innovators on the diffusion curve. They love to recycle organics. But your average John and Jane Smith, maybe that's not such a hot idea. And I think, David, that's the real reason why we're not seeing the kind of tonnages at any of the food waste diversion programs, even Minneapolis. Minneapolis has had a very robust program in place for 7 years. They have 60% household sign up in Minneapolis, and they only diverted 7,000 tons last year because so many people just don't actually, they signed up, but they don't do it. Next slide. And with that, here's my contact information. I'm happy to talk with anybody offline if you have questions and about anything. But well, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Craig. That was great. That was really good. Very, very interesting. So let's entertain folks. I'm sure folks have questions. Yeah.
I
Well,
do.
I have my hand up.
okay, hold on, Dave. You said Barbara? Is that? I don't see you, but go ahead. Oh yeah, there you are.
I
Okay,
see
go
my
ahead.
hand up.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. A very nice presentation. Question, tell me about Europe. Our daughter lives in Sweden, and at least according to her, it's incredibly high participation. I was just talking to a brother-in-law in Vancouver who says it's enormously high participation. I mean, they're not that much smarter than we are.
No,
But-
but they live in a world of much less land area. And that's been a driver behind European waste management now for almost a century.
Sure, Sweden and Vancouver count as low land. British Columbia has a lot of land. Northern Sweden
agree.
has a lot of land.
Yes, but it's ice. I went to northern Norway to visit a plant in Lillehammer, an AD plant, and the operator was telling me about how the diesel fuel in his fuel tanks froze last winter. Now, it's not exactly the most climate-friendly area for recycling organics, but the mindset in Europe is very different. I did an article for Biocycle about a group in Sweden, a community in Sweden, southern Sweden, that recycles using a series of colored bags. So you put your food waste in one colored bag, plastic in another color, metal in a third color, and all those bags are collected at the same time by the garbage truck. And they take it to a facility where they use optical sorters to route the different colored bags to different recycling end uses. It's just a different mindset in Europe that waste is a resource. And here in the US, we've lived with the idea of having the biggest backyard in the world, where we can throw stuff out in the backyard for decades and for centuries. And it's just going to take time to change those mindsets around.
Okay, thanks. Dave?
Yeah, I have two questions and they're kind of related. First, I wanted to know, can the CH4 be used that's produced at the Chesapeake facility, for instance, be used to heat the digest up to get the temperatures of 130, 160? And second, what is the use that, what are they using the methane for that they are producing there?
The methane that they are producing now, I believe, is being used as renewable natural gas, which is the current preferred usage of biogas. You can use, and you have to use some of the biogas that you produce for what's called parasitic energy. In other words, you have to have a certain amount of it you use to keep the digester warm. Now, can you heat it up to the point where it's a thermophilic digester? Not easily, because the microbes are a different group of microbes for thermophilic than mesophilic. But the biogas is produced today for renewable natural gas more so than for electricity, because the electric power producers aren't interested in buying distributed power from AD plants. The most they will pay is the wholesale electric rate, which is about 3 cents a kilowatt hour. And it's just really hard to make those numbers pencil out. Whereas California, which adopted their low carbon fuel standard several years ago, allows for paper transactions where if Bioenergy Devco is making an RNG product at Jessup, the molecules of biogas don't have to physically show up in California to be credited under the LCFS. They can get paid under the LCFS, even though those molecules never make it all the way to California.
Dave,
Thank you.
Louisa, you had a question?
No, it got answered along the way, but Barbara now has her hand up again.
Okay, let me get to Nyla and then go to Barbara.
I think she's moved.
Nyla,
Okay. I get that. I'm about to be unmute. Okay. All right. So yes. My question's in the chat, but I want to know, 'cause I was kind of stunned with the hundreds of miles that one truck you stated, or trucks. We're going back and forth. So I want to know, how is the extent of the transportation costs and overall environmental costs offset between those expenses related
Well, if
to the
you
compost waste?
if you look at the uh, comparison between greenhouse gas emissions from landfilling the food waste versus recycling the food waste, either by anaerobic digestion or by composting, that savings in GHG emissions is significant. Now, a portion of those savings is eroded away by the transport cost to move digestate to its ultimate disposal site. That's one of the drivers behind the desire by the AD industry to think of ways to process digestate on site. Now, the problem with the Jessup plant is they don't have any room. That's a 4.5 acre site, and it's about as tight a site as I've ever seen. So they physically don't have the space to do anything with the digestate but to haul it away. They are working on plans to recycle that digestate more locally, but until those plans come to fruition, they are forced to truck the material to farms in central Pennsylvania.
okay. Chuck, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. And I'm sorry about the wrist. I'm having carpo surgery next week.
That's okay.
Got a question about potential cost. How much land is needed to site one of these? Those that have been sited, are they in rural areas? Are they industrial areas? And what's the average operating cost of one compared to other source or other means of disposal of waste?
They can be located in urban areas, Jessup, Maryland being an example. Another example is Linden, New Jersey. They're in the process of building a private company's building a large anaerobic digester for all of New York City's food scraps on a piece of land. If you know Linden, New Jersey, you'll know it's a very densely developed industrial area. They are developed like the Heartland Biogas project in Colorado was out in the middle of nowhere because it was designed to serve dairy farms, and the food waste was sort of an adjunct. It was meant to be a dairy manure digester. So they can be literally anywhere. They take a smaller footprint than composting. You know, the Jessup plant handles about 100,000 tons per year on a 4.5 acre site, but they have constraints. Now, in terms of costs, they vary widely depending on how much pre-processing has to be done of the substrates. What are you going to do with the biogas? Like one plant in Paris, California, had to negotiate easements through 1.8 miles of private property to reach where they were going to put their renewable natural gas into the gas transmission grid. And negotiating those easements just jacked the cost up by several $1 million. Those costs have to be recovered by the private sector, and they're recovered in the form of tip fees. Now, in states like California that mandate recycling, you can pretty much charge whatever you want because everybody has to recycle. In Maryland, it only has a requirement if you're a very large generator of food waste, a requirement to recycle. the drivers are more economic. Now, is it cheaper to landfill food waste in Prince George's County than to either compost it at Western Branch or route it to Jessup? Probably not, given that there are no landfills in Prince George's County that are still open, to my knowledge.
Well, we do have an open landfill.
For municipal solid waste, really?
Yeah.
Still?
Yep.
Oh,
And we're building I guess you could call an annex on that site to expand the use for another, I'm not sure what the length of time is, but 50 years maybe, Kevin?
2050.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to get distracted. So Bill, you had your hand up, and then Barbara. You're muted.
On the
Okay.
biogas, is there processing that's required to remove the ammonia and hydrogen sulfide and stuff? Is that done by the facility, or is that something where when it's sent to wherever it's being used, that they filter that stuff out?
to make a renewable natural gas, you have to clean the gas up to pipeline quality. So you
Okay,
have to remove the carbon dioxide, remove any moisture, remove any nitrogen in the form of ammonia, remove any hydrogen sulfide. And
So
those that gas cleanup usually happens at the anaerobic digester. Now, that being said, Southern California Gas has developed a biogas cleaning station where they're taking in raw biogas from a number of different AD plants in Southern California and cleaning it up themselves before they put it in their own gas distribution system, which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense. Given they're in the gas business, you would figure they could figure out how to clean it up pretty well.
is
Now,
that trucked or piped to those facilities,
Both,
to that facility?
both.
Okay,
both. Now, if you're making electricity, you can burn the biogas directly. You don't have to clean it up in order to burn it for electricity production. But as I mentioned earlier, there's not a whole lot of interest in that electricity on the part of the utility companies.
thank you.
Can the electricity, oh no, sorry, Barbara, your hand is up.
Go ahead, Louisa.
Can the electricity created incur renewable energy credits?
I believe so, yes. I believe so. But I would have to research that and get back to you to be absolutely positive of my answer, but I believe it is eligible.
Thanks.
Barbara, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was waiting for you to call me. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted.
Question I realize there's going to be a big range in different of these aerobic digestion facilities, but what is the range and what is sort of the common midpoint of the methane release all through the entire process until that methane is actually consumed, either by turning into electricity or by burning it?
Unfortunately, there's no reliable data to answer that question. That is a topic that is of fairly recent import to the organics recycling industry and EPA, and the monitoring of those potential methane emissions is just now getting underway. But in terms of magnitude, it's a very small contribution compared to what we're getting out of the landfills and from bigger sources.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Oil and gas wells and all that kind of stuff. Much less.
But I mean, when natural gas started, they were claiming that was so great. And I remember I was at a seminar with Al Gore, who at that point said, I'm really worried about leaks. And, I mean, the leaks are horrible in a lot of that to make it really an environmental hazard. So that's what I'm worried on this too.
I think a far greater problem is melting permafrost in the northern part of the world, of the planet Earth. That's a whole nother discussion point.
Oh, I mean, there are lots of problems. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can only solve them one at a time, so.
Okay, so Barbara, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so Craig, I just want to ask you a couple things. I'm curious what's in the digestate itself. What is that composed of, especially since it's been using for food production?
Well, it's basically all the organics that you started with, minus some of the organic carbon that's been converted to methane and carbon dioxide. So digestate has concentrated nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Mm.
So NP and K. So it's viewed as a more robust crop, a soil amendment than pure compost. For example, a digestate might have a nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium value of 7% nitrogen, 3 or 4% phosphorus, 2 or 3% potassium, due to this concentrating aspect of AD. That's one reason why crop farmers like the material.
So why couldn't that product just be turned into like what we do in Prince George's County is turn the compost into a soil amendment product for sale to the retail market?
It could. That's what DC Water is doing with Bloom. You know, they put that stuff in bags and promote it all over the place.
Right.
And
Okay.
yes, you can certainly do that. But that is an additional cost. It's important to understand that the private sector that drives the AD industry thought of digestate as a revenue source when they were doing their initial business planning back in about 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And they're beginning to realize that it's not the great revenue source they once thought it was.
Mhm.
It's actually a cost.
Right. It's a liability.
It is a liability, and they're now recognizing that.
Okay, the other quick thing, and I know we spent a lot of time, and thank you very much for sticking with us. Is there a sort of general sense that you doing, the composting, and we have this covered gore system, which has containment of the methane, and then we have the windrows, which of course takes up a lot of space, but it's not very expensive. So what's the cost benefit between these two modalities? Or is it just really particular to, like, if you don't have a lot of space, the anaerobic can really work because it's a condensed, everything's condensed, versus you have to have a big piece of property to do the food composting in whatever form?
Or you have to have multiple properties. I'm in the middle of a project for Hamilton County, Ohio, around Cincinnati, where we can't find 30 acres of land for a big central composting facility. So we're now looking at 5 or 6 8-acre parcels to create multiple smaller scale facilities.
Wow.
And their solid waste advisory committee is thinking, well, yes, it duplicates equipment, it duplicates infrastructure, but it puts the processing closer to the food waste, and it sort of everybody shares the pain concept. We all get a little small composting facility instead of one community having to put up with a big one.
Right.
Which from a community standpoint makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, well, you don't have all the transportation issues.
Right.
So, I see 2 hands up. I don't know if they were up and you didn't put them down, or you actually have another question. Bill, Barbara.
I have another
Question.
comment.
Okay, let's do this quickly as possible. Bill.
Oh, okay. For the pathogens, since it's not hot enough to kill those pathogens when it's applied back to fields, are any of those pathogens transferable to the food that's produced from those fields?
Well, if they are put onto crops that are harvested within 60 days or so of the application of the digestate, there is some risk. But the land application requirements and the permits issued by Maryland Department of the Environment for land application make that a very unlikely occurrence.
Okay, thank you.
Barbara?
I just wanted to, just a quick comment. You had said that the gore in the organic compost facility retains the methane, but actually they create almost no methane because the under the gore they're pumping in air, so it's a really aerobic digestion. So there's very little methane produced.
Right. And as far as we know, not much leakage,
Right, very little produced and, yeah, exactly.
little fugitive. Okay, Craig, thank you so much.
You're
I
welcome.
do have your, I'm sure Dave does too, if anybody has any further questions. But that was really, really helpful. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We really, really appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. And feel free to reach out if anybody has any follow-up questions.
Okay, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, we're going to move on to committee reports, and our most robust report will be with Mr. Brosh. So take it away.
Okay, I've got a couple announcements and a couple questions. The first is something I just received this afternoon. EPA has announced $117 million grant program for food waste prevention and recycling. And there's going to be a September 30th webinar about this funding opportunity. If you haven't received that, I would be happy to send it to you the next day or so. I'm also really happy to know that we now have a November 4th tour of Area C at Brown Station. And I'm hoping most of the commission can attend that tour. I think Nancy has sent out something about that already.
Yeah, Dave, we need, Kevin, we need the address, not just, I think what the document that you sent me said BSLR something or other meeting room. And I'm not sure anybody knows what that is, or that was pretty close. BSRSL.
Brown
Where-
Station Road Sanitary Landfill.
Okay, so can you just give us the address, attach or send out the address to that building so everyone knows where to go?
Okay.
Kevin, is that the entrance off of Brown Station Road or is it the entrance off of White House Road?
Entrance of Brown Station Road. Yes.
Okay, it's where the trucks that are bringing the fill dirt, the cover cross, is that correct? That's where you enter at that gate? Or right in that area?
No, I would say go in the employee entrance.
In the ploy, okay.
Yes, and then park in the
So
employee
when you're
parking lot.
traveling,
Mhm.
yeah, when you're traveling south on Brown Station Road, it'd be a left hand into the property.
Yes.
Thanks.
Sort of
And then
across from the convenience center.
Correct. And then the employee parking lot you'll see on the right. And if you take the sidewalk straight down, you'll see a brick building. We can give you a little sketch, but that's the training building. It's a brick building.
So Kevin, we had requested, I'm not sure who is the company that's doing the planning and engineering for Area C. You're muted.
So it's SCS engineers.
So we would like to have somebody from SES there. Is that possible?
Our engineer will facilitate the tour.
Who was that?
So it's Eric Jackson.
I think we would.
He works closely with our consulting firms on designing Area C.
Okay, well, I will get back to you on that. Nyla, can you turn your mic off? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
You can hear my typing?
Yes. Okay,
Should I
Dave?
continue? Yeah, okay. For the for us commissioners and possibly maybe some other folks who aren't aware of it, Laurel is going to be starting a mandatory composting program beginning in January of 2025 and hope to have the whole program operational across their town by, I believe, July of 2025. And we're kind of following that right now. We've talked with the person who's running that program, Michelle Blair, and we think there may be some opportunities for some of the other municipalities in the county to possibly either look at or maybe even partner with Laurel and get more people composting. So that's something that's in the works, and I think it's pretty interesting and hopeful. Louisa and I have begun a survey of the 27 municipalities in the county to look at their recycling programs, and we hope to complete the survey in a few weeks and have a report by next month's meeting. So stay tuned for that.
Sorry, Dave. Can I jump in here for a sec?
Sure.
Yeah, so the idea is to get a handle on the issue with multifamily units and whether the municipalities understand the difference between what their enforcement and responsibilities are versus the county. So it's to help ensure that there's clarity about how this should be working so that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. A side benefit, since we're calling these municipalities and speaking with them, is just to clarify sort of what they are doing. You know, are they doing any composting? You know, what presumably they're taking their recycling to the MRF, et cetera. We're just going to confirm those things. But the impetus for this was really trying to understand with multifamily units, especially places like Greenbelt and all throughout, there's a lot of areas in the county that are incorporated that have large multifamily, and it's not clear if they're providing any opportunities for recycling. So we just want to make sure that there's clarity about what's going on. I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Oh, no problem.
Let me just interrupt here. My understanding is that the county law just requires that these multifamily facilities provide an opportunity for on-site. It doesn't say how convenient, how large. Is it just one recycling can at the far, far end? It's, I think, very, very lax.
I think it's actually a little bit more,
at least it used to be that way.
I think I did look at that a while back before I got sick. I think there's a little bit more parameters than that, but there is requirements that they're supposed to follow. And no, it's not mandatory, but there's a number of things that they're supposed to do. So that's another thing, is when we sort of figure out what's going on, the other thing would be to suggest, you know, maybe I don't know how it would work, but the county may be able to say to them, I don't know if the county can say to the municipalities, you need to do X, Y, or Z, but that's something we could consider. Okay, Dave, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. I have some kind of bad news, and maybe some of you already know this. The University of Maryland program that has a airplane that flies around the state looking at methane emissions actually went down, and the pilot was in the airplane and the equipment in the crash were all lost. So that's kind of set them back. I think they're trying to deal with that right now. So I just wanted to let you know that has happened. It happened, I think, in the last month. I have some questions, and one actually goes over to the methane study, or an emission study that the University of Maryland is hoping to do, and they've had some negotiations going on between them, the Department of the Environment, and NIST for a long, long time. And we'd like to know where that stands and how we can get that moving so that we get that study underway. And that's, I guess, a question I'm posing to DOE folks tonight.
Okay, so we are scheduling a meeting with UMD and the other parties that are involved, because in the latest non-disclosure agreement, parties like GWU and MDE were excluded. So DOE would like to understand the reason why they were excluded. So Director Crooms requested for a meeting with all the parties, and I have reached out to Professor Dickerson, get their collective schedule, and then we'll set up a meeting to discuss the matter. So I'm
Kevin,
just
oh, good. I was just gonna say, Kevin, we've been kind of hearing the same kind of thing for months. It seems like it never really goes anywhere. And I've even heard that they may be looking for another landfill if they can't get this resolved at some point in the near future.
unfortunately, there are some issues that need to be addressed because in the original agreement, there are other parties that were planned to be involved. So UMD decided to exclude them. So the DOE needs to understand why they were not included in the latest non-disclosure agreement. But just today, I have reached out to Professor Dickerson to have their collective schedule to meet with you on the matter.
So Kevin, you're
hope-
saying that the University of Maryland has not signed the non-disclosure agreement?
They have, but GWU and MDE were excluded. So
NDU?
MDE, Maryland Department.
Oh,
of
MDE. And I didn't
Yes.
think George Washington University had anything to do with this study.
But from the very start, they were, I think they were in, I mean, they were involved.
Okay, I've never heard that this whole time. So that's news to me. I thought it was NIST.
NAST as well, and NOAA, NOAA.
Okay, yes, I've heard. So it was NOAA, NIST, GW, Maryland
George-
Department of Environment, DOE, and the University of Maryland. Are those all the players?
That's correct, yes.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 players, and 2 of them have been excluded through this process.
NOAA as well. So NOAA, GW, MDE, and NIST.
And what?
NIST.
Yeah. Well, that's 4 out of 6. I thought you said also DOE. Oh, no, not DOE,
No,
MDE. Sorry.
MDE,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So all this time, all this discussion about getting this document signed, only 2 players had signed it, and that was us, DOE, and University of Maryland. The other 4 players had not signed the agreement.
Only UMD, yes. But then when the non-disclosure was sent to us, Director Crooms has some questions about, the other parties not being involved in the agreement as originally planned.
Okay, so do we know whether they were unwilling to sign it or they just weren't asked?
That's what we want to understand.
Okay,
Because from the point of view of UMD, for example, they said that, it took a long time for it's taking a long time for the parties to sign the agreement. That's one perspective. So we want to understand the reason why. That's why we're setting up the meeting with them.
okay, well, we'll look. I'd like to know what the outcome of that is.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll
thank
update the
you.
group.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And the meeting is scheduled for when?
I'm just waiting for the schedule from Professor Dickerson. He will reconcile the availability of DOE.
Okay,
But
Thank-
we have communicated with them already.
okay. Dave, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Kevin, I also want to ask you about the RFP on beneficial use of methane or the fixing of the pipeline. Where do those efforts stand? Are we getting any closer to something happening there too? And do you have a timeline?
So the RFP was advertised on August 16, and the deadline to submit the proposal is on September 26. The interested vendors have visited the Brown Station landfill to understand the site, to see the site, and ask some questions. And so, yes, it's progressing, and hopefully by September 26 we'll have the proposals.
How many
received.
proposals are you anticipating?
I think I'm not exactly sure, but I think there are more than 7 vendors who expressed interest in the project.
Okay.
Is that public information? Could we see those, what they're sending you back?
I'm not sure, but I think again it would be under the MPIA request for you to see the proposals. Because I think there are stipulations in the scope of work, for I think some confidential information in the RFP, but I think it will have to go through the MPIA request.
So it's a FOIA request?
Yeah, for you to access the documents.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so on September 26th, Kevin, you'll have proposals in hand. How long do you anticipate it's going to take for DOE to evaluate those? And then I presume if there's sufficient, if something's sufficient, a decision may be made. What does that timeline look like?
So the goal of the county is to have a decision before end of the year. That's the target. And, for the awarding of the project to the selected vendor.
And then what do you anticipate the period of work to possibly begin?
I think by next year, as soon as, the award is given, and then, all the documents are complied with by the vendor, the project will start.
Okay. Okay, so sometimes hopefully the beginning half of the year.
Mhm.
Okay, Dave, go ahead. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I just have one last question. A sort was done, I think it was in May, the University Parks compost that was coming into the OCF. And we were told that we'd be able to get a second one done possibly in November. We wanted to do that because prior to, a couple of months ago, we were still handing out bio bags. We've since stopped that, and concerned that what may happen now is we may start seeing plastic. And I think it was agreed that we do a second sort in November, or during maybe the fourth quarter. So I'm wondering if we can have that scheduled for that period of time.
Yes, we can do that. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
That's all I
Barbara.
have.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Do you have anything on the compost outreach? You want to?
Sorry, muted. Yeah, I'm really sorry with this camera. I don't know if my camera just died because it was working while I was on hold trying to get in here. So I don't know why it's not working. I apologize. At any rate, yeah. So thank you, Marilyn and Kevin, for sending out information this afternoon on the request that only got to you guys belatedly because I had gotten slow in sending it, and then Nancy was sick and couldn't send it in, and so I had only sent it yesterday, I guess, or day before, or whenever. So yeah, it was a bunch of questions following up on Kenny Battle's notification to the SWAC that the county council had wanted the SWAC more involved in messaging and asking how we can get more involved in working with DOE and messaging. And so Marilyn and Kevin sent some information, which I appreciate. And I had a whole bunch of questions on these various things, of course. And so we'll follow up. You had one of the things they sent was a lovely compilation of messaging that had gone out to the county, or at least some of it, what had gone out to the county residents. And in a quick perusal of it, I'm struck by how very clear it is on the how of composting and not anything clear on the why of composting. There is one article in some publication, I didn't know, the Washington Independent by Andrea Crooms, that you would have thought talks about it, and it talks about the methane that comes from food waste in the landfill, but it never says that you don't get methane from food wastes that go to the OCF. So it really doesn't make the greenhouse gas argument at all clear. And that's not, I believe, a widely distributed publication. It certainly was not in any of the mailings to the residents. So I'm still hoping very much that we will be able to get that the SWAC can write something that could get sent to the residents to try to get residents to buy into it. Because at least in our community, talking with people, everybody says, why should we do it? The only thing we've told it can do is generate leaf grow, which can save money. But the idea of the greenhouse gas, climate change connection has just been lost in the messaging. And I'm very much hoping we can get that in. Then I had also asked a question about with the new contracts, and we hopefully that Chuck had sent to Nancy the link, and Nancy sent out to a county council meeting where Andrea Crooms presented to the county council. Unfortunately, most of that was addressing the glitches in the rollout of the new refuse pickup schedule. But she had a couple of slides on the fines that the new contract will give to the haulers. And we were asking, and Nancy agrees, that it would be wonderful to have Andrea Crooms come out and give the SWAC a presentation of whatever we can know about that we don't need to do a Maryland Public Information Act request for, and what we need to do a Maryland Public Information Act request for. But I mean, certainly the information that went to the county council and is publicly available online should be able to be presented, and then that they ask questions about should be able to be presented to the SWAC. So that would,
can I comment quickly on that presentation that was done to the county council?
Chuck, can you hold just a second? Let me just wrap up one part, then we'll move to that because it's a separate topic. So thank you, Barbara. So Marilyn, let me just clarify. I did send a formal request, and I'm sure you've seen it, to Director Crooms, synthesizing from Barbara's material a request for information. And the goal is for us to collect data, including planning documents and samples of collateral materials and so forth. But what I would ask at this point would be if the department could collect all of it in one place and send it to us at one time. It's very hard to get these different bits and pieces of things. So I think it would be just really more helpful if you guys could just hold on to the stuff you're collecting, pull it all together in response, and send us that, and then send us something back that's just together.
Yeah. Nancy, are you referring to the compost campaign outreach?
Correct. Did you see the letter? Did you see the letter I sent?
Yeah. So the file that I sent to you, that has everything in it except for the postcard mailers, because that particular consultant, LMD, did not do the postcard mailers. And Kevin sent that separately. So that concludes everything. And then
Okay,
he will also have it, or he may already have it in the SWAC folder, which we will provide retraining on how members can access that online portal.
okay,
Could you,
great.
could you
Okay.
possibly in the interim send us the PDFs of those mailers?
No, I think Kevin did already.
Yeah, they are all in PDF version, Barbara. And they are
Oh.
all in the SWAC folder.
Oh, they're in the folder, but for those of us who can't get in the folder, if you could just email us the PDFs.
Okay.
Okay, Marilyn, thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that everything was included. I haven't had a chance to go in there and look yet. But I appreciate that. Okay, so okay, so we're gonna move on to Chuck. I just want to say that I have, just so you know, Barbara, I also have put in a request by email directly to Director Crooms about coming and speaking to us about this rollout of this project. I also feel, frankly, that I have concerns that we were not notified about this entire large project for this very long amount of time, and that concerns me. So, okay, Chuck, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a few comments quickly on the briefing that was done for the county council. And I did speak to my council person as recently as this morning to see if she had any updates to report. And she advised me that they still have not been given any information as follow-up to that briefing. For those of you that watched the briefing, there were a number of questions that were raised specifically about which haulers have been terminated. There apparently was one. That information wasn't furnished. There was no information as to what area that terminated hauler served. There were a number of questions raised about who was fined and what the fines were. They have not furnished any update on fines. They were holding the fines in abeyance for another month, which would have been the month of August. The month of August has now passed. There were questions raised about the number of calls that came into 311 about service. Those numbers haven't been provided. So we are as much in the dark as the council, because as I indicated, I spoke to Walla this morning and she indicated that her office has not been given any updates either. I did request that if they get them, that she send them to me so I could share them with the commission. I would hope that they would come directly from the department, but if we don't get them that way, perhaps we'll get them through our council people. But I just did want to report on conversations I've had with my council person and with others on the council concerning that briefing. I was a little concerned about not having full disclosure of information. I recognize the process is still in the infancy stage, but I was hoping for some better responses than what I heard in that briefing. Thank you.
Okay, I think, Barbara, did you want to say something else about that?
Yes, just very briefly. So I had also then asked the question, when you guys had sent something on what are the haulers having to do signage on improperly put out refuse. And it wasn't clear if that includes when plastic bags are used to pack either the recycle or compost. And if the signage that the haulers have to put out, if that specifies to the residents what's wrong with their materials, why it was not picked up, because if it simply says we didn't pick it up, that's not an educational opportunity, and that wasn't clear from the material that was sent. Can you clarify on that, Marilyn, please?
Yeah, so the information, which we are going to send it to you, to SWAC. The information on the sticker tag is primarily the information that states that the the plastic bag usage is unacceptable. And that was,
Great.
and yes, that's the main message on it. And that's, you know, applicable to both the compost program and the recycling program. And also we have a door hanger that the inspectors utilize, which has a lot more information on it, where they can, it's basically they can check a box as to, you know, why something wasn't collected. It goes into much more detail, and, you know, they leave their name and their contact information on that. We're going to be providing that to SWAC as well, so that you can see the door hanger. Now the
Super.
the sticker itself, we just had a meeting on this just yesterday afternoon with the director's office and the DCAO's office, that Mr. Holt, and we are going to be updating the sticker. I mean, we do have a finite amount of space, but it was recommended that perhaps, you know, we can make a larger sticker so that some additional information can be put on that sticker, in addition to the, you know, the no plastic bags. So,
Was the SWAC supposedly to be more involved? Could the SWAC be sent this sticker and give our input in the updating of it?
sure.
That would
Yeah.
be great. Because
Mhm.
this is, I would think that this is the sort of thing that the SWAC could actually even be useful to DOE in trying to give some citizen input into
Yes.
things like this.
Yeah, so-
'Cause this
so-
has been years and years that our neighbor continues to put out the stuff in plastic bags because he says it's always picked up, and he doesn't believe when I tell him that's wrong. And he says, but Bates always picks it up. What's the problem? So
Yeah, and
it's just really frustrating.
right, and the contractor should be tagging it. Yes.
Yeah, but this is Bates, so, you know.
Okay, so any more questions on the Director Kroom's report that was sent out?
Nancy, I have one question.
Okay.
I guess this is probably for Marilyn. You're talking about putting things out for the participants, the residents. Is there anybody sort of checking to make sure that the contractors are also doing the right thing and doing as they're tasked to do?
Yeah, well, yes, we do have inspectors monitoring the routes, and we have increased our monitoring, if you will, of the incoming loads of materials at the materials recycling facility and at the landfill. What we're specifically looking for is any mixed loads where the crews are, you know, putting both recycling and trash into the same collection truck, and to see, you know, sometimes that may be delivered to the MRF, and we recognize also it could come to the landfill. So we have beefed up that monitoring at both facilities, and you know, and we will be receiving detailed reports and addressing it accordingly with the contractors and by the service areas this mixing may be occurring. Because while we're not necessarily getting service requests through the PGC 311 and or, like, you know, evidence, sometimes we do get proof, meaning a resident has a door ringer and they send us the video and we can clearly see that the crew mixed into the same collection truck, and that does carry a very hefty fine.
And do you actually assess those fines?
Yeah, yes, we are. Yes.
Why doesn't that change their behavior?
Well, you know, the month of July, as I believe Andrea, Director Krims may have stated, those fines are being held in abeyance because it was the start of the collections, the new contract, and people were still learning routes, etc. But
Okay, so there were no fines in the previous contract.
they're held in abeyance, meaning if the behaviors have not changed, that the fines, the July fines, may still go into effect. And also, I'm not aware, I heard, I believe, I'm not sure which member stated that they had heard Director Crooms during the council meeting say the August fines were held in abeyance. I was out last week, but I'm not aware of that. As far as I know, the August fines are being levied.
The July fines were held. They were waiting until they had the August reports before they determined whether or not they were going to collect them. So maybe you misunderstood what I stated,
okay.
or maybe I
Okay.
stated incorrectly. I didn't say the fines for August weren't being collected. They were withholding action on July fines pending a further evaluation on the August numbers.
Right.
Were there no fines in the old contract?
Oh, yes, there were fines.
Were they levying those?
Yes,
Could
absolutely.
we be
Marilyn, do
told
you know when those numbers are
what
going
those
to be
fines were?
available as to who was fined and how much? Because
They,
like I said, they
the-
weren't reported that day, and as of today, my council person still hadn't had them.
yeah, so Director Crooms should be sending that information very soon. It's available.
If we could be sent, what were the fines in the previous contract? And how much in the last year was levied? Don't have to say which trucking company, just total.
I think
Yeah,
it would also, I think it would also be helpful if we could get some statistical information on the number of calls coming into 311 prior to the changeover and after the changeover, whether it's by week or by month, concerning trash pickup.
Yeah, well, there was a very sharp increase during the month of July, particularly the first week, with that being a holiday week. I will report that we are back to what we consider normal, service requests. But July was a drastic increase,
Can you
meaning
share those statistical data with us?
yeah, so typically per day, with having, approximately 100,000 collections, 50,000 of trash, 50,000 of recycling. The typical daily number of missed collection service requests that get reported to the county is, hovers around it can go anywhere between like 80 to 120 service requests a day. During the month of July, especially during the first couple of weeks, that daily number had increased to about 1,000 a day. That's why I said it was a very sharp increase.
Somebody
And
has hard numbers though, correct?
Yeah, a lot of those miscollections involved on-premise collections. There was quite a few of those. But again, today, and actually for the past, I would say at least 6 weeks now, maybe more, we have been back into our normal typical range of anywhere between 80 to 120 reported misses a day. And the misses can be, anything from, a late set out by the resident. It could be material wasn't picked up because it was, unacceptable. It could be human error where, the crew missed it. So it could be a whole, we even have things where, for instance, we had an on-premise collection. The resident happened to have a dog in the yard, and the crew could not or would not enter the gate to go in the backyard because the dog was present. And in that case, for instance, the hauler, they did send us the address and the video, expecting that the resident's going to report a missed collection, but it was because they had a dog in the yard. So I'm just saying there's a lot of different reasons for those misses when they do occur.
Okay, everybody. Now you have your hand up. No, okay. But I want to, it's time, we're past our time.
Yes,
And Is this a question?
It was only just a quick update, about 2 minutes or less, probably not even 1 minute. So yes, I did get an update as far as the environmental measures updated with my local Prince George County Giant stores. Talking with the manager, he's pretty all right. He's not available on LinkedIn, but he was great. I just saw him and talked to him briefly just the other day when buying some pick-me-up stuff. So they have, well, they updated their cart situation with when it comes to the security. They don't have updated plastic bag container recycling. They don't have the compost measures in the back, of course, because it's a whole facility. I spoke with oh, what's his name? He has the Gengar socks. I just spoke with him like 2 days ago. He gave me kind of the whole rundown. I'm going to be talking with him. He's one of the staff there, and he works in produce. I had asked him a question. I'll follow up with that as far as what they do with their waste. I know that's maybe overstepping, but maybe not, because it's commercial enterprise, but still we want to know where they're gleaning and putting all their food waste. It doesn't even hit our grocery tables in our tables at home.
You're breaking up completely.
There was trash all up in the parking lot. What else? Oh, I tried to ask him about like any improvement, like what's the best method of communication between getting those things done, via survey, via calling, email. You know, he was stating that essentially a little bit of bureaucracy, but working with the county, it's not as speedy. So when it comes to getting things done, whether it be getting another ADA lane in the parking lot there, because there should be probably at least 2 more, which is another subject. I know we're not ADA, but I just was peeping certain things that could be improved upon environmentally. I'll talk with them further and keep you all posted. And another thing, bonus, is that I was at the Maryland Seafood Festival, the 2024 Maryland Seafood Festival. Everybody, it was a mess. When it came to the waste, there was no composting. There was
Nyla,
course,
I'm
in bins,
sorry. I don't
but
want to
they were
interrupt
labeled
you.
trash.
But if you would do me a favor and just, if you send me that information about the seafood festival, we can follow up.
Okay.
Just send me a quick note. It's like we're so over time. We didn't even have our resource recovery division report either. So if you have anything additional, if there's anything, anybody has additional, send it to me. I'll send stuff out to everybody. Kevin sent me the report, but it was just today. So I will also send out their report to everybody probably tomorrow sometime. So Niall, I'm sorry, just kind of really press. I want people to be able to try to end at 7:30. So anyway, please, if there's something additional, send it to me and I'll make sure everybody gets it. And I'll put you first on the committee list next month. So you can go first and not get cut off.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, but okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I think it was a really informative meeting and appreciate everybody's input. And if there's anything you need to follow up on, just let me know. Okay.
Get well, get well.
I'm trying. Okay, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.